Hi, welcome to Miss Richardson's U.S. History 5-minute lectures. This information is U.S. Notes 4.9, Results of the Korean War, Part 1. It is going to take 2 parts to get through all these. It includes information that aligns with the second section on your unit study guide. Remember, you have control over this lecture, so use your study guide to help you figure out what to write down, pause and rewind if you need to, and rewatch anytime you need. And make sure you bring those questions you have to class the next day. Let's go ahead and get started. In the last set of notes, I talked about some turning points in the Korean War, times where the war changed course or turned from favoring one side to another. I also told you about the armistice at the end of the war. So today I want to talk to you about the results of the war. So what happened after the armistice? We want to look at both the gains and the losses of the involved countries and groups. So we'll finish these with the next set of notes. So we'll continue this through 2 sets. First, let's look at Korea. Korea as a country gained nothing from the war. They had over 1.8 million military casualties, that's the dead and wounded, and this is combining the North and South. They also had over 3 million civilian casualties in those 2 areas. A lot of their industry and agriculture was ruined and destroyed in the war, and millions of Koreans became refugees who needed support from the government to live. So Korea had failed to unite, had lost millions of lives, lost jobs, lost industry, and lost money. The Korean War was a failure for both the North and South Korea. So this is going to create tension on the Korean peninsula with 2 very different countries forming over the years. Today we still have the communist North Korea and capitalist South Korea. They're on the verge of a war essentially every day, even today, ready to pick up arms and restart the Korean War. To the Koreans, the war never ended. It's just on a break. We're just a very long ceasefire, even though it was 1953 when it ended. The United Nations, on the other hand, did have some successes or gains. They gained respect from the world. They had taken prompt action in the war, sending troops to change the course of the fighting. This action was especially impressive because it was a joint action by all members, not just one. The League of Nations could never have done that same thing. So this made countries see the United Nations as a successful group in their first test. It was really their first test and they were a success. The UN did have some losses or some negatives, however. They had over 17,000 casualties in the fighting. These casualties came from many different countries, member countries, meaning that the sadness from the war was felt in many areas of the world, not just one country. However, the largest issue for the UN was that the war was controlled, guess I'll plug in here. The war was controlled almost entirely by the U.S., even though it was officially a United Nations action. Because of the U.S. control, the United Nations could have been seen as a puppet of the United States, not an independent entity. In the end, the UN did prove to not just be a U.S. puppet. However, the U.S. often still takes a lead role in the UN actions throughout the world. So, not a U.S. puppet, but very much led by the U.S., influenced by the U.S. over the years. In our next set of notes, we're going to look at the gains and losses by the U.S., the Soviet Union, and China in the Korean War. So this is the end of U.S. Notes 4.9. Hopefully you did learn something in them, and if you have any questions, make sure you bring those to class. I'll see you then.